Thank you for joining our LEA Special Education Point of Contact monthly webinar for November. I see that some people are still connecting and logging on. For those of you who are joining us, thank you so much. Good morning for joining us this morning. We have our handouts for this presentation in PDF in the taskbar under handouts for you to download. If you would like to read along with us this morning. And in addition, this webinar will be recorded and it will be on our website at least a week after this presentation, along with the copy of the presentation. And we'll be getting started in just one moment. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tiffany Ingram, and I'm a program analyst here at OSSE in the K-12 Systems and Support team. Thank you for joining our November monthly webinar for our special education points of contact. We are going to jump in and get started with our presentation this morning. This is our agenda for this morning. We will start out with our IDA monitoring updates and reminders. We'll transition into our SEDS updates. We will also cover a child outcome summary and the updates we have around that. You will hear from our team doing a review of the alternative assessment process. We will go over some transportation updates and new resources that have been provided from the team. And we will close out with announcements and reminders. I'll ask the presenters to make sure your mic is on mute until it is your turn to present. And I will turn it over to Karen Morgan Donaldson to review the IDA monitoring reminders and updates. Karen?
Thank you, Tiffany. Again, this is Karen Morgan Donaldson presenting on behalf of IDEA Part B Monitoring and Compliance. Our first slide today provides information related to a memo that went out on October 30th. All LEA leaders and special education administrators received the memo. And this memo outlined Part B monitoring activities, an activity schedule for this school year. The memo highlighted the following information, starting with OSSE will implement an annual monitoring schedule, including focused monitoring of 3 to 5 year-olds. Additionally, OSSE will shift to a quarterly technical assistance touch point based on LEA data, and we'll be talking about that later in the presentation. OSSE also continues to acknowledge that challenges, all of the challenges that LEAs are going through associated with COVID-19, and we are continuing to provide the following flexibilities. We are continuing to allow LEAs 30 days for the correction window to validate their data. It used to be 10 days. We are also giving consideration to all prior written notices when determining correction of noncompliance. We also noted in the memo that OSSE anticipates slippage for LEAs and state compliance rates in areas related to timeliness, IEV, REV, or initial evaluation, reevaluation, C2B transition, related to COVID circumstances. So we just wanted to highlight that for you. And also, the memo also gave an update related to the monitoring and compliance activities that we will review in the next slide. So next slide, please. So this chart outlines all monitoring and technical assistance in the area for IDEA Part B compliance for the remainder of school year 2021, or as we also call it, federal fiscal year 2020. One thing I would like to highlight for you is that in July 2021, you will see that initial evaluation, it didn't make it in this slide, but in July 2021, initial evaluation and C2B transition monitoring should be included in July 2021. So that is a quick note. We will be providing this update in writing as well. But starting in December, LEAs that will be selected for our targeted technical assistance will be notified that they are being selected for that. In January, that technical assistance will begin. Again, this technical assistance is around the areas of IEV, REV, and C2B transition. Again, with a focus on students ages 3 to 5. And then in April, we will be monitoring for secondary transition requirements, reevaluation timeliness, and then again, also providing that targeted technical assistance in the areas that I mentioned above. In May, we will be monitoring for significant discrepancy and disproportionate representation, and then child find monitoring. And then again in July 2021, we will be providing that targeted technical assistance that I keep mentioning, and we will be going into that further. We'll also be monitoring for significant disproportionality, not to be confused with significant discrepancy. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, this was not in the memo, but we will be monitoring for initial evaluation and C2B transition monitoring in July of 2021. And then we anticipate to issue IDEA LEA determinations for federal fiscal year 2019 in August of 2021. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights targeted technical assistance. OSSE is going to be selecting LEAs that demonstrate a need for support in the areas of initial evaluation, with an emphasis on 3 to 5-year-olds, C2B transition, and reevaluations. OSSE utilized data from last year to tier LEAs based on needed support. I do want to note that OSSE also considered COVID-related delays and the effects it had on each LEA's compliance rates. So if you were chosen or not chosen for targeted technical assistance, please know that OSSE did analyze each LEA's data before and after COVID. So we do recognize that everybody's data was compromised by those that last period of time during that federal fiscal year. In our next slide, we're going to do a quick shift and do a quick review of OSSE's prong 1 and prong 2 process. So next slide, please. So the next couple of slides provide an overview of prong 1 and prong 2 process. While we realize this is maybe not new information for you, it is very important, so we are providing a review of this information. So in exercising its monitoring responsibilities, all state agencies must ensure that when it identifies noncompliance with the requirements of IDEA Part B, the noncompliance is corrected as soon as possible, but no later than 1 year after the identification of noncompliance. So during this process, OSSE uses a 2-prong approach when we are verifying correction of noncompliance. Prong 1 entails the LEA correcting individual student level noncompliance. So the action step for LEAs for prong 1 is LEAs upload necessary documentation in the non-compliance report in DC CATS to demonstrate that the student non-compliance has been corrected. For prong 2, the LEA demonstrates that it is now correctly implementing the specific regulatory requirement. This is LEA's opportunity to demonstrate that it is not a systemic issue and that it is not something that is going on repeatedly after, and it's not just student level. The action step for LEAs is to identify student files and enter those student files, including the USI information, in the prong 2 report in DC CATS. Next slide. So once your LEA completes prong 1 in DC CATS, your LEA's prong 2 report will open and will populate the number of files you need to submit. This chart provides just an overview breakdown for how many files are required per number of files flagged or non-compliance. So if you have 1 to 5 files that were found to be non-compliant, the number of student files that you would need to provide to OSSE to review would be 1 file. And looking at the chart, it goes up to a maximum of 5 files. Next slide. So this slide provides an overview of the timeline for correction of non-compliance. First, OSSE releases initial findings in DC CATS. This report provides LEAs an outline or identifies all what we call proposed findings of non-compliance. So LEAs have 30 days to verify its data and or make any appeals for these proposed findings. At the end of 30 days, OSSE monitors review any evidence that LEAs uploaded into DC CATS. If the evidence demonstrates that the LEA was not, in fact, non-compliant, then a finding will not be issued. So all other proposed findings will become official findings. So at this point in time in the process, this begins the 365-day timeline. Once these official findings are issued, LEAs have 90 days to complete prong 1 in DC CATS. Once your prong 1 is completed, your LEA will communicate with you, your monitor will communicate with you as to when prong 1 is closed. Once prong 1 is closed, your prong 2 report will be populated in DC CATS, and LEAs have 30 days to engage in the prong 2 process. We say engage in the prong 2 process because it might take LEAs longer than 30 days to complete prong 2 along with OSSE, but we do expect LEAs to engage in the process within those 30 days. Prong 1 and prong 2, as we mentioned earlier, must be completed within the 365-day timeline. If they are not closed within the 365-day timeline, they become long-standing non-compliance. Next slide. So we discussed prong 2 and what it means, but practically speaking, how should you complete the prong 2 process? There are 2 steps to complete this process. 1, you should identify student files for OSSE to review. The files for submission must be newer than the reporting period that was monitored. For example, if your LEA was flagged for an untimely initial eligibility and the initial eligibility for quarter 2 report, that would be the monitoring review period of October 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019, you should identify student files where the eligibility occurred after January 1st, 2020, so after the reporting period. So that's the first step, identifying the student files. And then the second step is providing the student information for your OSSE monitor to review in DC CATS. We do in a couple slides, I think it's the next slide, we have a link to a tutorial for exactly how to do this. But in DC CATS, you are expected to enter student name and USI into the prong 2 report, and then communicate with your LEA monitor to inform them that you have completed or provided that information in prong 2. At that point, your LEA OSSE monitor will review the student record, determine if it shows that it's compliant. Your OSSE monitor will upload the student's final eligibility or whatever the report is and approve to close out the prong 2 process. And at that point, verification of non-compliance for both prong 1 and prong 2 will be completed. So this is just a quick reminder also that this is your prong 2 is your LEA's opportunity to demonstrate the work that you are doing on a systemic level. OSSE is pointing out when we find areas of non-compliance, we point them out to you, you correct them, and then we expect you to do the work to make sure that any systemic issues that are causing these areas of non-compliance are corrected. So again, we are asking you to give us the evidence that shows that you have done the work to correct this potential systemic non-compliance. So in terms of how do you find, what's the easiest way to find files, to identify files for prong 2? When it comes to timeliness indicators, when we're talking about initial evaluation, reevaluation, C to B, transition, we recommend that you use your LEA's performance and planning report in the statewide longitudinal education system, better known as SLED. And we will go over that in a few slides. So next slide, please. So going back to prong 2, I mentioned earlier that there is a tutorial. This slide gives you information for how to input student file information into DC CATS. It does not give you information on how to select those students, but it does tell you once you've selected those students, how do you enter them into DC CATS. Next slide. So are there any tools that can assist with file selection for prong 2? Yes, as mentioned earlier, OSSE encourages LEAs to utilize the PNP report, which we will cover in the next several slides. Next slide. So the LEA Performance and Planning Report, which we call the PNP, the purpose of this report is to provide LEAs with up-to-date timeliness data related to initial evaluation, reevaluation, and C2B transition. This gives LEAs access to data without having to submit a data request to OSSE. It also provides LEAs the opportunity to track their own improvement over time. It reflects on past timeliness data and identifies students who have overdue or upcoming events for Part C to B transition and also Part B eligibility, including initial eligibility and reevaluation. Next slide. So the next slides just, we have some screenshots. I'm not going to spend too much time on these because these are a review from last year, but they do give you information on how and where you can access the LEA PNP report. You log into SLED. If you need access to SLED, you can request access through sled.info@dc.gov. Once you have access to SLED, you can use the OSSE support tool to request access to this particular report, which is an enterprise reporting system report. Next slide. So the LEA Performance and Planning Report, it is updated nightly, so this is real-time data. It includes all students who are actively enrolled in SEDS for your LEA. This real-time report shows current status of all C2B transition and eligibilities. We encourage all LEA special education points of contact to review this report. In the past, we have recommended on a weekly basis because it does help you track your timeliness compliance rate over time. I do want to point out that this is not used for monitoring. This report is only a tool for LEAs to use within their internal process. You can always click on the info icon to access a guide to the report. Next slide. This is a screenshot This report was updated to reflect the newish, it's not new anymore, but to reflect the new timeline of the 30 days from referral to consent, and then consent to eligibility at 60 days. And this is broken out for you. You will notice that on the bottom of the report for eligibility, there is still a window there that shows referral to 120 days. That is still in there because when we previously updated this, we still had some files that fit into that category. You should not have any files that are populating in that window at this time. You will also see that there is a reevaluation report and Part C to B. Next slide. What I just said, this window right here shows referral to 30 days. This can help you stay on track with that timeline. Next slide. And then this window here shows and displays the timeliness from parental consent to eligibility, which is 60 days. Okay, next slide. So as we move to yearly monitoring for IEV and REV, initial evaluation and reevaluation, it might become difficult to recall what students, which students' eligibilities took place when, which ones took place timely. That's why we encourage you to utilize the LEA Performance and Planning Report to complete your prong 2 process within DC CATS. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over at this point. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the question or the chat box, and we will certainly address those questions.
Thank you so much, Karen. And we'll turn it over to Rita to provide us the SEDS updates.
Awesome, thank you. I just have a few quick updates on the special ed data system. If you are responsible for service logging, you may have noticed some changes in the system. We mentioned this in last month's webinar, but I wanted to restate it again, that you will see new delivery options under the drop-down under service delivery. You will see delivered in person and delivered virtually. So you'll see that in your drop-down. And then additionally, an additional change that has also happened in the next slide, you will see that on the actual service tracker form, the area is now defaulted to a blank area, and the provider needs to actually choose that area in order to create that final service tracker. So those are just some quick updates that you will see in SEDS. Thank you, Tiffany.
Thanks so much, Rita. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen to share our child outcome summary updates.
Thank you, Tiffany. Okay, I am presenting on behalf of Dawn Hilton. And to begin, OSSE would like to recognize the efforts of our pre-K special education POCs for recently addressing the noted discrepancies found during the June 2020 COS cost checkpoint. Thank you for your questions, feedback, and willingness to update the cost data without hesitation. As in previous years, OSSE conducts biannual data verification checks to ensure that preschool and pre-K students who receive special education services have cost scores entered into the DC CATS system. There will be 2 OSSE cost data checkpoints for the 2021 school year. The first will occur shortly coming up here in January, and the second will occur in June. For the January checkpoint, LEAs should ensure that they have submitted their cost entry data in DC CATS for every pre-K student with an IEP dated before January 15th, 2021. Also, as a reminder, if cost entry data was already submitted previously for a student, it should not be collected a second time. So for example, if cost entry data was collected in fall 2019 for a pre-K 3 child, and now the child is in pre-K 4, no action is needed at this time until the child exits pre-K special education. And again, if you have any questions related to this, feel free to put it in the questions box and we will do our best to answer them. Again, Dawn Hilton is our child outcome summary contact, and she is not here today. So if we cannot answer your questions today, we will certainly get answers to your questions as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen. We're going to turn it over to Michael to share with us some updates around the alternative assessment eligibility process.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Craig. I serve as the assessment specialist for special populations at OSSE. And I just want to give you a few reminders about the alternate assessment eligibility process. The memo for the 2021 school year is now out. It is posted on the OSSE website. If you are applying for alternate assessment eligibility, you should reference this document for all policy and procedures that will take place with the alternate assessment eligibility process. Next slide. All right, so this is the timeline that we are using for this school year. You guys saw this in the October webinar, but we just want to give you a brief reminder of what is taking place now. So right now we are at the eligibility determination process. So we have conducted the reviews in SEDS, and LEAs will receive their eligibility determinations in SEDS on November 23rd, which is Monday. You will also receive the determinations in the alternate assessment eligibility quick-based application. So LEA assessment managers and alternate assessment POCs will receive access to that quick base on Monday, November 23rd. That's where you will be able to view the determinations as well as initiate the appeals process if your LEA chooses to appeal any determinations that were made by OSSE. So that appeal process runs from November 23rd through December 18th. You will do that appeal in the quick base application and upload additional information into SEDS so OSSE can review that. Additional information should include new data points that support the need for an alternate assessment, additionally any work samples that the student may have, or evidence that proves that the student needs an alternate assessment. Finally, you will receive your determinations, all final determination for any appeals on January 8th. If you have any questions about the alternate assessment process, please feel free to reach out to me directly.
Thanks so much, Michael. Again, if people have any questions throughout this presentation, do not hesitate to use our chat box to submit your questions there, and we will have time at the conclusion of our presentation to go over questions. If we do not have the exact answer, we will ensure that someone from the team at OSSE follows up with you about your question following this presentation. I am going to support with providing transportation updates as our transportation team is out of the office for today. So I will support in just providing the reminders that our team has gone over in months past around the LEA considerations for this school year, and ensuring that everything is updated as needed within the Tote system. Our team does want to bring to your attention that the OSSE Department of Transportation team has provided additional resources around reopening. So as this presentation is in the handout section of the GoToWebinar dashboard, you will be able to view the OSSE DOT guide reopening video, as well as links to the bus safety kit documentation that highlights what our team is doing to keep our students safe. Our team also wants to highlight the importance of ensuring Tote is updated with the correct in-person start date. And for friends who have not had any Tote training or need to still be trained in the Tote system, the team is having an upcoming training on December 2nd at 10 a.m. To support with those who still need to be trained in the Tote system. If there are LEAs who have additional questions about Tote, about DOT, feel free to reach out to the email address provided here at below, and someone from the transportation team will be sure to follow up with you in regards to your questions. I'm going to now turn it over to Annette to provide us with announcements and reminders from our teaching and learning team.
Great, thanks, Tiffany. First reminder that we have today is that the IEP Quality Series is now available online on demand. So it's a cool opportunity for those teachers and special education staff members who may need a little bit more flexibility in completing this type of course. This was previously offered by, this was put together by Jennifer Carpenter, who many of you know at OSSE. And it's a really great in-depth series about making outstanding IEPs, the whole process, start to finish, and looking at data and all of that. So I really encourage you to pass this information along to your colleagues and members of your special education teams who are involved with making IEPs. And it's very exciting that this is now available as an online course to go at your own pace. So the link is here. I'll also pop the link in the chat box. Next slide, please. Also, you've seen this before. We're just throwing it out there again. OSSE has launched a special education resource hub for families and students. This will continue to be updated throughout the year. OSSE is committed to continuing to provide great resources that you can then direct parents and families to for those who may want to learn more and need more support there. It also has information about the Office of the Student Advocate, other community groups, and resources. Next slide. Another great series that Jennifer Carpenter from OSSE has put together, several of you participated in over the summer. This was in response to our quick pivot to online learning. As you know, distance learning provides many challenges in how to serve our students with disabilities. And as we're currently in distance learning and may have some of you in blended learning situations, this series was recorded and is now available to watch on demand on the OSSE website. Many of you saw this and accessed this as part of the start of school period over the summer, but we just want to remind you this is still available. All of the resources, the data collection tools, a whole bunch of Google Forms that you can take and copy and duplicate and customize and use to collect data from families and teachers and students. It's just trying to make your life easier in doing your, in serving your students with disabilities while we are in this distance learning posture. So again, a reminder about this as a resource for you to pass along to your colleagues or access yourself. Next slide. Also, in general, OSSE offers a large quantity of professional development opportunities open to all educators, whether that's teachers, school leaders, service providers, staff, counselors, instructional coaches. There's something for everyone. And if you want your teachers in your building to be aware of what's coming up next, really encourage them to subscribe to the TAL PD Bulletin. So I'll drop this link in the chat as well. But the Teaching and Learning PD Bulletin is the #1 way to know what's happening, what's coming up. I'll drop a link to the most recent edition of this bulletin, as well as how to subscribe. Please pass this along to your teachers and your colleagues. And it does include all topics for all teachers serving and all school leaders, counselors, every role. Great, thank you. Next slide. So we here at OSSE, we are interested in learning what you do to make sure the information shared in these monthly webinars gets passed on to your colleagues and to your staff serving at individual campuses. We have heard that sometimes information doesn't get passed all the way down to the end of the line to the classroom teachers and staff or the school building level. You in your role as the LEA special education point of contact or transportation point of contact have responsibility to disseminate information that you get from OSSE to all relevant audiences. So we're looking to hear your great ideas and strategies for how you take what you get from these webinars and turn it around and share it with your team members. So we're asking you at this time to answer in the chat box. It's a free response. There's no multiple choice. We are just interested in hearing what you do with the information that OSSE provides each month in these webinars and how you share that with your teammates and with your campus level individuals. And maybe you add your own information onto that at the LEA level. As you know, OSSE is not super prescriptive in all things, that we leave many decisions up to the LEA. So we're curious to know how you share this information and perhaps couple it with your own. I'm seeing some response coming in. Keep them coming. Someone shared that they pass along the information regularly during their department meetings or team meetings. Awesome. Some people send it out in emails. Some people send an email directly to their colleagues. They're just in the habit of that. Some people have a monthly special education update email that is sent to all the special ed staff and administrators, where anything in this webinar that's relevant can be thrown into that regular update. One LEA has a special education newsletter that goes out weekly, and pertinent information is provided to SPED teachers, service providers, aides, etc. That's awesome, you got a newsletter. Another person is sharing they provide information to staff during the monthly grade level meetings. And again, someone else is sharing information at the weekly directors meeting. Awesome. Oh, another good tip, you download the slides, highlight the information that is pertinent, and then share it pass it along to staff. Cool, these are great ideas. Keep them coming. We're gonna go ahead and move on to close out this webinar, but again, we are interested in hearing your ideas about how you share this information and challenges you experience in trying to share this information with those who need to hear it in your organizations.
Thanks so much, Annette. I'm so happy to hear that everybody has some amazing ideas on how they continue to share the knowledge that they get here in these webinars with their other folks in their LEA. I want to also remind our participants in the call that if at any point you ever miss a webinar, we hope that you don't, but in the case that you do, we do have a web page that where you can watch all the previous webinars and download any resources or presentations that were shared during that month. So that link is also great to share with folks in your LEA who may have not been able to join the call today. We typically have our video and presentation uploaded within a week of the presentation, sometimes sooner. And of course, we have the handout for today's presentation in PDF here in the GoToWebinar handout file. And we just want to say thank you so much for joining the November webinar. And we want to open this time for any questions that may be in our chat box. I wanted to leave up our OSSE point of contact slide here if you have any questions or concerns, and a reminder that our December webinar will be on Wednesday, December 16th. OSSE team, do we have any questions in the chat box that may benefit the greater group here on the call today?
Sure. So we had a couple of questions. Someone asked if the 30-day correction window is new, and that is new. It used to be 10 days. OSSE rolled out the 30-day correction window as part of COVID-19 flexibilities for LEAs. And if you have any outstanding prong 2 requirements, your monitor will let you know. You can also always contact your monitor, your LEA monitor directly if you have any questions about if you have outstanding issues with non-compliance or completing compliance obligations. Got a few questions about the role of the UDE application. And just as a FYI for everyone, the UDE application is used to help LEAs make sure that they have clean data. A lot of the utility of that application comes into play around child count season, so that you know where you may have data errors that would result in you not receiving funding for a student. But when it comes to monitoring and compliance, our monitoring and compliance team only relies on authoritative data systems. We don't use our quick-based applications for monitoring and compliance. We rely on the source system, so we rely on SEDS. But I do know that there's a lot of emphasis on making sure that you reduce your UDE errors, and that is to really help make sure that you are clean and clear to go for funding purposes. I think that is it on questions.
Okay. Well, if there's no additional questions, we wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving. We do have an appendix included in this presentation if you have any questions about the role of the LEA, Special Education Point of Contact, for your review. But I will go back and keep that IC Point of Contact slide up for anyone if you need to follow up with any folks on the OSSE team. We wish you a safe and happy Thanksgiving. And we will see you in December on December 16th. Have a great rest of the morning, everyone.